My name is Amaya and I am 28 years old. I used to believe that my wedding night would be the most beautiful night of my entire life. Instead of lying in my husband's arms, I found myself sitting alone in a luxury hotel room, still wearing my wedding dress. The sounds coming from the room next door at midnight changed everything I had ever believed in. And what I saw that night, I wish I could forget forever. Before we begin this story, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, and if stories about love, betrayal, and finding yourself again speak to your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to join this community. Have you ever had your whole world shatter in a single moment? Stay with me, because what happened next will stay with you long after this video ends. I grew up in a small town just outside of Portland, Oregon, surrounded by evergreen trees and the constant smell of rain on pavement. My parents, Thomas and Linda, had been married for over 30 years when I was planning my own wedding, and their love story was the foundation of everything I believed about relationships. They met at a county fair when they were both 19, and my father still looked at my mother like she was the only woman in the world. That kind of love was what I wanted. That kind of devotion was what I expected when I finally found my person. I was the middle child of 3, with an older brother named Daniel and a younger sister named Brianna. We were a typical American family in many ways. Sunday dinners, summer barbecues, holidays spent arguing over who got the last piece of pie. My parents taught me to work hard to be kind and to never settle for anything less than genuine love. They told me that when I found the right man, I would know. And for a long time, I believed I had found him. I worked as an interior designer at a small but growing firm in downtown Portland. I had earned my degree from Oregon State University, spent 3 years as an assistant designer, and finally worked my way up to lead designer on residential projects. My work was my passion. I loved transforming empty spaces into homes that told stories that reflected the people who lived in them. I believed in beauty, in intention, in creating spaces where love could flourish. My best friend Harper had been by my side since our freshman year of college. We met in an art history class, bonded over our shared obsession with mid-century modern furniture, and had been inseparable ever since. Harper was everything I was not. She was loud where I was quiet, bold where I was cautious, and she had a way of seeing through people that I often envied. She worked in marketing now, but her true talent was reading people like open books. I met Derek Lawson at a gallery opening 3 years before my wedding. I had gone alone, wanting to study the way the space was designed, the way the art interacted with the architecture. I was standing in front of an abstract painting, trying to understand what the artist meant by the violent slashes of red across a white canvas, when a voice beside me said, "I think it is supposed to make you feel something, not understand something." I turned to find a man in a tailored gray suit, dark brown hair swept back from a face that could have belonged in a magazine. He had green eyes that seemed to hold secrets and a smile that revealed a single dimple on his left cheek. He introduced himself as Derek told me he worked in finance at a firm downtown and asked if he could buy me a drink at the gallery bar. That first conversation lasted over 2 hours. We talked about art, about Portland, about our families and our dreams. Derek told me he had grown up in California, moved to Oregon for college, and stayed because he fell in love with the rain. He said he was looking for something real, something lasting, something different from the shallow relationships he had known in his 20s. He asked for my number, and I gave it to him without hesitation. Our first official date was the following Saturday at a restaurant overlooking the Willamette River. Derek arrived with flowers, held my chair for me, and remembered every detail I had mentioned at the gallery. He knew my favorite color was sage green, that I had a weakness for dark chocolate, that I dreamed of one day opening my own design firm. He listened in a way that made me feel seen, truly seen for the first time in years. The months that followed were a dream I never wanted to wake from. Derek took me hiking on weekends, cooked dinner for me at his apartment, introduced me to his favorite coffee shop tucked away on a street I had never explored. He met my parents after 3 months, charmed them completely, and won my father's approval with his firm handshake and his promise to always treat me with respect. After 2 years together, Derek proposed. It happened at the same restaurant where we had our first date, at the same table overlooking the river. He got down on one knee, produced a ring with a small but perfect diamond, and asked me to spend the rest of my life with him. I said yes. Before he even finished the question, tears streaming down my face as other diners applauded around us. The engagement was everything I had hoped for. We spent a year planning the wedding, choosing the venue, the flowers, the music, the menu. I designed our save-the-date cards myself, incorporating elements of the gallery where we had met. Derek was often busy with work, traveling for meetings, staying late at the office, but he always told me he trusted my taste, that whatever I chose would be perfect. Harper helped me with every decision. She was my maid of honor, my sounding board, my voice of reason when I started spiraling about whether the napkins should be ivory or cream. She never said anything negative about Derek directly, but sometimes I caught her watching him with narrowed eyes. When I asked what was wrong, she always shook her head and said she just wanted to make sure I was happy. I did not notice the signs then. The phone calls Derek would step away to take, the text messages he would read and quickly delete, the nights he came home smelling faintly of perfume I did not recognize. I was too busy planning our future to question the present. I trusted him completely because trust was all I knew how to give. The morning of my wedding arrived with September sunshine streaming through the windows of my childhood bedroom. I had spent the night at my parents' house, following the tradition that the bride and groom should not see each other before the ceremony. I woke at 6 a.m, my heart already racing with excitement, my mind already rehearsing the vows I had written and rewritten a dozen times. Harper arrived at 7 with coffee and pastries, followed by the other bridesmaids, my sister Brianna, and my 2 cousins from Seattle. The house filled with laughter and music and the frantic energy of women preparing for something magical. The makeup artist arrived at 8, then the hairdresser, and soon I was being transformed into a bride. My dress hung in the corner of the room, a vision of ivory lace and delicate beading that had taken 6 months to create. I had worked with a local designer to bring my vision to life, a gown that was classic, but modern romantic, but not overwhelming. When I finally put it on and looked at myself in the mirror, I did not recognize the woman staring back at me. She was radiant. She was ready. She was about to marry the love of her life. My father knocked on the door at noon just as the photographer was capturing my final preparations. He stood in the doorway in his best suit, his eyes immediately filling with tears. He told me I was the most beautiful bride he had ever seen, then corrected himself and said I was tied with my mother on her wedding day. We laughed together, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. The ceremony was held at the Grand Bellevue Hotel, a historic building in downtown Portland that had been converted into a luxury venue. The ballroom was decorated with white roses and eucalyptus candles, flickering on every surface chairs, arranged in perfect rows, facing an arch, draped in fabric and flowers. 150 guests had gathered to witness our union, friends and family, from both sides, co-workers and neighbors, and people we had met along the way. I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, my eyes fixed on Derek standing at the altar. He looked handsome in his black tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled, his smile wide and welcoming. But as I got closer, I noticed something in his eyes that I had never seen before. A flicker of something that was not quite joy. A shadow that passed so quickly I convinced myself I had imagined it. The ceremony itself was traditional and beautiful. We exchanged vows that we had written ourselves, spoke of love and partnership and building a life together. When Derek slipped the ring onto my finger, his hands were steady, but mine were trembling. When we were pronounced husband and wife, he kissed me quickly, almost perfunctorily, before turning to face the applauding crowd. The reception began immediately after the ballroom transformed into a celebration space, with a live band and a dance floor and tables laden with food and flowers. Derek and I took our first dance to a song we had chosen together, a jazz standard about finding your person and never letting go. He held me close, but his body felt tense, his mind clearly somewhere else. I noticed her for the first time during the cocktail hour. A woman with striking red hair, maybe my age, or a few years older, standing near the bar in a black dress that clung to every curve. She was beautiful in an aggressive way, with sharp cheekbones and full lips painted dark red. I did not recognize her from our guest list, and I was certain I had never seen her at any of Derek's work events. I asked Derek about her as we made our rounds greeting guests. He glanced in her direction, and for just a second, something crossed his face. Then he smiled and told me her name was Sloan, a new colleague from his office who had been added to the guest list by his boss. He said she was harmless, just there to represent the company, and suggested I not worry about her on my wedding day. But I did worry. Something about the way Sloan looked at me made my skin crawl. It was not hostility exactly, but something worse. Amusement, maybe. Like she knew a secret that I did not. Like she was waiting for something to happen. Harper noticed it too. She pulled me aside during dinner and told me she had seen Sloan and Derek talking privately near the service entrance. She said Derek had his hand on Sloan's arm, his face close to hers, his expression intense. I told Harper she was being paranoid that Derek loved me, that he had just married me in front of everyone we knew. But my heart started beating faster, and a cold feeling settled in my stomach. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of champagne toasts and cake cutting and thrown bouquets. Derek continued checking his phone, excusing himself to take calls, disappearing for minutes at a time, with vague explanations about work emergencies. I smiled and laughed and played the role of the happy bride, but inside a small voice was beginning to whisper that something was very wrong. The party ended at 10 in the evening. Derek and I were escorted to the honeymoon suite on the top floor of the hotel, a stunning room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. There were rose petals scattered across the bed, champagne chilling in a silver bucket, candles ready to be lit. This was supposed to be the beginning of our life together, the first night of forever. I changed out of my wedding dress and into a silk nightgown. I had purchased specifically for this night a delicate champagne-colored piece that made me feel elegant and desired. When I emerged from the bathroom, my heart full of expectation, Derek was putting on his jacket. He looked at me with an expression I did not understand and said he had to handle something urgent downstairs. A work situation, he explained, something that could not wait. He promised he would only be an hour, maybe less, and told me to have some champagne and relax. Before I could respond, he kissed my forehead and walked out the door. I stood alone in the honeymoon suite, the door closing behind Derek with a soft click that echoed through the silence. The room that had seemed so romantic just moments ago now felt empty and cold. I looked at the rose petals on the bed, the champagne sweating in its bucket, and felt the first real crack in the perfect image I had constructed of my wedding day. I told myself not to overreact. Work emergencies happened. Derek was a dedicated employee, ambitious, always striving to prove himself. It made sense that his company might need him even on his wedding night. I poured myself a glass of champagne and settled onto the couch by the window, watching the city lights twinkle below, telling myself he would be back any minute. 1 hour passed. The champagne went flat. I checked my phone obsessively, but there were no messages from Derek, no updates on when he would return. I called him once then, twice then, 3 more times. Each call went straight to voicemail, his recorded voice cheerfully asking me to leave a message after the tone. I texted him simple questions. Where are you? Is everything okay? When will you be back? The messages showed as delivered, but never read. The cold feeling in my stomach grew heavier, spreading through my chest like ice water. By 11:30, I was pacing the room. I had taken off the silk nightgown and put on a hotel robe instead, no longer in the mood for romance. I tried to come up with reasonable explanations. Maybe his phone had died. Maybe the meeting was running long. Maybe he was on his way back right now, ready to apologize and make it up to me. I picked up my phone and called Harper. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. She asked if everything was okay, and I told her everything was not okay. I explained that Derek had left over 3 hours ago and had not returned or contacted me. I heard the sheets rustling as she sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Harper's reaction was immediate anger. She told me this was unacceptable, that no man should leave his bride alone on their wedding night for any reason. She said she would start making calls, reaching out to Derek's best man and groomsmen to see if anyone knew where he was. She promised to call me back within 15 minutes. The 15 minutes felt like 15 hours. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands clasped together, my mind racing through every possibility. Maybe there had been an accident. Maybe Derek was hurt somewhere, unable to call. Maybe I should contact the front desk, ask if they had seen him leave. Harper called back at 11:50. No one knew where Derek was. His best man, a college friend named Tyler, said Derek had mentioned something about meeting someone but had not given any details. The other groomsmen had assumed Derek was in the honeymoon suite, exactly where he should have been. Harper offered to come to the hotel immediately, but I told her to wait. I said I wanted to find Derek myself first to give him a chance to explain. At exactly midnight, I heard sounds coming from the room next door. Laughter muffled through the wall, but distinct. A man's voice and a woman's voice intertwined in the kind of intimacy that needed no translation. I froze, every muscle in my body going rigid because I knew that laugh. I had heard it 1,000 times over 3 years. I had fallen asleep to that laugh and woken up to that laugh and built my entire future around that laugh. It was Derek. I pressed my ear against the wall, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The voices became clearer, though I could not make out the words. There was playfulness in Derek's tone, a lightness I had not heard from him all day. The woman laughed again, high and musical, and said something that made Derek respond with clear delight. I pulled away from the wall, my hands shaking my breath, coming in short gasps. This could not be what I thought it was. There had to be an explanation. Derek had married me just hours ago. He had stood at that altar and promised to love me forever. He could not be in another hotel room with another woman on our wedding night. But I had to know. I had to see for myself. I threw on the clothes closest to me, a simple dress I had packed for the morning after, and grabbed my room key. My hands fumbled with the door handle as I stepped into the hallway, the plush carpet muffling my footsteps. Room 33 was right next door, just a few feet away, close enough that I could still hear the muted sounds of conversation through the wall. I walked to the elevator instead, my mind racing with a plan. I rode down to the lobby, my reflection in the mirrored walls, showing a woman I barely recognized. My hair was still pinned up from the wedding, but pieces had escaped, hanging limply around my face. My eyes were wide and wild, filled with a fear I could not name. At the front desk, I approached a young man in a hotel uniform and told him a story. I said I was staying in room 33 with my husband, that I had stepped out for ice and accidentally locked myself out. I did not have my key card, I explained, and my husband was sleeping so deeply he could not hear me knocking. The concierge looked at me with polite concern, checked his computer, and confirmed that room 33 was indeed registered to Derek Lawson. My stomach dropped. There it was. Confirmation that my husband had booked a second room on our wedding night, a room that was not supposed to exist, a room where I could hear him laughing with someone else. The concierge handed me a replacement key card, apologizing for the inconvenience. I thanked him with a voice that did not sound like my own and walked back to the elevator, the plastic card burning in my hand like evidence of a crime. I stood outside, room 33, the key card trembling in my grip. The sounds from inside had quieted, replaced by a silence that felt even more ominous. Part of me wanted to turn around, go back to the honeymoon suite, and pretend I had never come down here. Part of me wanted to believe there was still an innocent explanation, that I was about to open this door and find something completely harmless. But I knew. Somewhere deep in my bones, I already knew what I was going to find. I swiped the card and pushed the door open. The room was dim, lit only by a few candles scattered on the nightstand and dresser. The same candles I realized with horror that had been provided to our honeymoon suite. The same romantic setup that should have been ours. On the bed, two figures scrambled apart. Derek shot upright, his bare chest gleaming in the candlelight, his face cycling through shock, fear, and something that looked almost like anger. Beside him, moving more slowly, deliberately, was Sloane, the woman with the red hair, the new colleague, the harmless guest from the reception. She was not wearing much, a black silk slip that left little to the imagination. She looked at me not with shame or embarrassment, but with something closer to satisfaction, like she had been waiting for this moment, like this was exactly what she had wanted. I could not move. I could not speak. I stood in the doorway frozen as the reality of what I was seeing slowly dismantled every truth I had ever believed about my marriage, my husband, my life. Derek was the first to break the silence. He jumped out of bed, grabbing a shirt from the floor and pulling it on as he moved toward me. He started talking fast, the words tumbling over each other in a desperate rush. He said it was not what it looked like. He said he had had too much champagne at the reception. He said he did not know how this had happened, that it was a mistake, that I had to believe him. I looked past him to the champagne bottle on the nightstand. It was still 3/4 full. Derek had barely touched it. He was not drunk. He knew exactly what he was doing. Sloane swung her legs over the edge of the bed, making no effort to cover herself. She watched me with those sharp eyes, a small smile playing at the corners of her dark red lips. When she spoke, her voice was smooth and confident, like she was discussing the weather. "Amaya, right," she said. "Derek has told me so much about you." I felt my knees weaken. Derek spun around and told Sloane to be quiet, but she ignored him, rising to her feet and reaching for a robe that hung on the bathroom door. "We have been together for over a year." Sloane continued tying the robe loosely around her waist. Derek promised he would call off the wedding, but I guess he changed his mind, or lost his nerve. He was always better at making promises than keeping them. Derek's face went pale. He took a step toward Sloane, his hands raised like he wanted to physically stop her words, but she sidestepped him easily. "Show her the messages," Sloane said, a challenge in her voice. "Show her what you have been telling me for the past 14 months. Derek whirled back to face me, his expression pleading now. He said Sloane was lying, that she was obsessed with him, that she had pursued him relentlessly, and he had made a terrible mistake by giving in. He said it meant nothing that I was the one he loved, that we could get past this if I would just give him a chance. But Sloane had already unlocked her phone and was holding it out toward me. I took it with numb fingers, scrolling through message after message between her and Derek. Love declarations, plans for the future, complaints about me, about my naivety, about how easy I was to deceive. Derek had written that he did not love me, that he was only marrying me because his parents expected it, because it looked good for his career. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I had to blink to keep reading each message a fresh wound. Derek had been living a double life for over a year. Every kiss, every promise, every moment of intimacy between us had been a lie. I was not his love story. I was his cover story. I handed the phone back to Sloane without looking at her. Then I looked at Derek. Really looked at him for the first time since I had entered the room. He was still talking, still making excuses, still trying to rewrite reality into something that would let him off the hook. But I was no longer listening. I reached down and pulled the wedding ring from my finger. The ring that had meant forever. The ring that now meant nothing. I let it fall to the carpet, watching it bounce once before settling into the fibers. "You are dead to me," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Calm. Final. Like I was pronouncing a verdict. I turned and walked out of the room without waiting for his response. Derek called after me, his footsteps heavy on the carpet as he followed me into the hallway. He grabbed my arm, spinning me around, his eyes wet with tears that might have been real. I pulled away from him with all the strength I had left. I looked into his eyes one last time, searching for the man I thought I had married. He was not there. Maybe he had never been there. I walked back to the honeymoon suite alone. I locked the door behind me and slid down to the floor, my back against the cold wood. The rose petals were still scattered on the bed. The champagne was still sweating in its bucket. Everything was exactly as I had left it, but I was someone completely different now. I sat on that floor and cried until there were no tears left, until the sky outside the windows began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, until the worst night of my life finally ended, leaving me to figure out how to survive all the days that would follow. The sun rose on my first day as a married woman, and all I felt was empty. I had not slept at all, had not moved from my position on the floor until the light became too bright to ignore. My body ached from sitting so long on the hard surface, but the physical pain was almost welcome. It gave me something concrete to focus on, something other than the gaping wound where my heart used to be. Harper arrived at 4 a.m, banging on my door until I finally got up to let her in. One look at my face told her everything she needed to know. She did not ask questions, did not demand explanations. She simply wrapped her arms around me and held on while I broke down all over again. I told her everything through gasping sobs, the sounds through the wall, the key card from the front desk, Sloane in her black silk slip, Derek in someone else's bed on the night that was supposed to be ours, the messages, the lies, the 14 months of betrayal happening right under my nose. Harper listened without interrupting, her face growing harder with every detail. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she said 3 words, "We leave now." She helped me pack the few things I had brought to the hotel. The beautiful lingerie I had chosen for my wedding night went into the trash. The champagne remained untouched on the table. Harper called down to the valet and had my car brought around while I washed my face and tried to make myself look like something other than a woman whose life had just imploded. We drove to my parents' house as the city was just beginning to wake up. My mother was already in the kitchen when we arrived, preparing Sunday breakfast out of habit. She took one look at me and dropped the spatula she was holding. The conversation that followed was the hardest of my life. I had to tell my parents, the people who had taught me to believe in love, that the man they had welcomed into our family was not who any of us thought he was. My mother cried. My father went very quiet. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. When I finished, he stood up and said he was going for a walk. He did not come back for 3 hours. Derek started calling that afternoon. Message after message appeared on my phone, voicemails stacking up like evidence of his desperation. He apologized profusely, blamed stress and alcohol, and a moment of weakness. He swore it would never happen again. He said he loved me, that Sloane meant nothing, that he had made the worst mistake of his life, and would spend the rest of it making it up to me. I did not respond to any of it. Harper took my phone and blocked his number after the 20th message, but Derek found other ways. He sent flowers to my parents' house, an enormous bouquet of roses that my mother threw in the garbage without even reading the card. He showed up in person 2 days later, and Harper met him at the door with such cold fury that he actually took a step backward. She told him to leave and never come back. She said if he contacted me again, she would make sure every person in Portland knew exactly what kind of man he was. Derek tried to push past her to get to me, but my father appeared behind Harper with a look on his face that I had never seen before. Derek left without another word. His mother called me later that week. Patricia Lawson was a refined woman who had always been polite to me but never warm. She apologized for her son's behavior, said she had raised him better than this, said she hoped I could find it in my heart to give him another chance. I thanked her for calling and told her that would not be possible. The days blurred together in a haze of grief and anger and crushing shame. I could not stop replaying every moment of the past 3 years, searching for signs I should have seen, warnings I should have heeded. Had there always been something off about Derek's late nights at work, about the way he guarded his phone, about the distance I sometimes felt between us that I had attributed to stress or fatigue. I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping through the night. I lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks, my cheeks growing hollow, my eyes ringed with dark circles. My mother brought me meals that I picked at without appetite. My father sat with me in silence, his presence a comfort, even when words failed us both. 2 weeks after the wedding, I finally called a lawyer. Her name was Sandra Chen, and she came highly recommended by a friend of Harper's who had gone through her own divorce a few years earlier. Sandra was brisk and professional, asking questions without judgment, taking notes on a yellow legal pad that seemed to fill with my failures as a wife before I had even been one for a single day. The divorce process was surprisingly simple given the circumstances. Derek had violated our marriage vows in the most spectacular way possible, and even he seemed to understand that fighting it would only make things worse. He resisted at first sending me a long, handwritten letter explaining his side of the story. In the letter, he blamed his job for the pressure that had led him astray. He blamed his own father for modeling infidelity when Derek was young. He blamed Sloan for pursuing him relentlessly until he gave in. He blamed everything and everyone except himself. When I finished reading, I felt something shift inside me. The love I had felt for this man, the love I thought would last forever, finally began to die. I sent back a single response. I told him I wanted the divorce finalized as quickly as possible. I did not want his money, his property, or his apologies. I wanted only my freedom and my name. Derek's lawyer called Sandra 2 days later to negotiate terms. The divorce was final 3 months after the wedding. I received the papers on a Tuesday afternoon, sitting in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of the life I had planned. I was 28 years old, divorced, unemployed, since I had taken a leave of absence from my job, and more lost than I had ever been. But somewhere beneath all the pain and humiliation, I felt the first tiny spark of something that might have been relief. The months that followed my divorce were the darkest of my life. I moved out of my parents' house and into a small apartment downtown, needing space to fall apart without an audience. The walls were thin, and the neighbors were loud, but I did not care. I barely noticed anything outside my own head. I spent most of my days in bed watching the ceiling, replaying memories I wished I could delete. I saw Derek everywhere. In restaurants we had visited together. On streets we had walked hand in hand. In the faces of strangers who reminded me of him for no reason at all. The city that had once felt like home now felt like a museum of my failures. Harper came by every day without fail. She brought groceries I did not ask for, cleaned the apartment I had let become a disaster, and sat with me even when I had nothing to say. She never pushed me to talk about what had happened or pressured me to move on faster than I was ready to. She simply showed up day after day, proving that some love could be trusted. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I caught a glimpse of myself in the bathroom mirror and did not recognize the woman looking back. She was gaunt and pale with hollow eyes and tangled hair and skin that had forgotten what sunlight felt like. She looked like someone who had given up on life. That was the moment everything changed. I stood in front of that mirror for a long time, really seeing myself for the first time in months. I thought about my parents still together after 33 years. I thought about Harper showing up every single day, even when I gave her nothing in return. I thought about all the dreams I had abandoned, all the parts of myself I had let Derek's betrayal destroy. And I asked myself a question: is this who I want to be? The answer was no. The next day, I made an appointment with a therapist named Dr. Elena Vasquez. She had come recommended by Harper, who had seen her after a difficult breakup years earlier. I was skeptical at first, unsure what talking to a stranger could possibly do to fix the wreckage of my life. But I was desperate enough to try. My first session with Dr. Vasquez was uncomfortable. She asked questions I did not want to answer, probed wounds I had tried to ignore. But she also said something that stuck with me long after I left her office. She told me that Derek's choices were not my fault. that his betrayal said everything about him and nothing about my worth as a person. That healing was possible, but only if I was willing to do the hard work. I started seeing her twice a week. I talked about Derek, about the wedding night, about all the signs I had missed or chosen to ignore. I talked about my parents and their perfect marriage, about the pressure I had felt to find that same fairy tale love. I talked about my fear that I would never trust anyone again, that some part of me had been permanently broken. Dr. Vasquez helped me understand that I was not broken. I was wounded, yes, grieving, certainly. But wounds could heal, and grief could transform into something else if I let it. I started writing in a journal, pouring out all the thoughts that kept me awake at night. I started taking walks around the neighborhood, then longer walks through the city, then hiking trails in the parks outside Portland. I started eating regular meals again, taking care of my body after months of neglecting it. 6 months after my divorce, I finally felt ready to return to work. But when I thought about going back to my old job, sitting at my old desk, resuming the life I had built with Derek lurking in every memory, I felt sick. I needed something new, something that was entirely my own. The idea came to me during a session with Dr. Vasquez. We were talking about what made me feel alive, what brought me joy even in the darkest times, and I kept coming back to design, to the thrill of transforming empty spaces into something beautiful and meaningful, to the satisfaction of creating environments where people could thrive. What if I started my own firm? I said, almost surprised by the words coming out of my mouth. Dr. Vasquez smiled. What if you did? I talked to Harper that same evening. I expected her to be cautious, to point out all the reasons why starting a business in my fragile state was a terrible idea. Instead, she leaned forward with excitement sparking in her eyes and asked what she could do to help. Within a month, we had a business plan. Within 2 months, we had a tiny office space, a borrowed desk, and a name, Rebirth Designs. It felt right. It felt like exactly what I needed. The first year was brutal. We took on any project we could get, from staging apartments for real estate agents to redesigning the lobby of a local dentist office. We worked 16-hour days fueled by coffee and determination, and the stubborn refusal to let this venture fail. There were moments when I wanted to give up, when the debt felt crushing and the clients were impossible, and I questioned whether I had made a terrible mistake. But I kept going. Harper kept going with me. And slowly, painfully, we started to build something real. The turning point came when a boutique hotel owner walked into our office looking for someone to redesign his property. He had seen photos of a residential project. We had completed a mid-century modern home that had been featured in a local design magazine. He liked our aesthetic, he said. He wanted to see what we could do with something bigger. That project changed everything. We spent 3 months transforming the hotel from a tired roadside stopover into a destination that people actually wanted to visit. When the photos were published, our phone started ringing. New clients came looking for the firm that had created something so beautiful. One project led to another, then another, until we had more work than we could handle. 1 year after I started Rebirth Designs, I was sitting in a new office 3 times the size of our original space. I had 12 employees, a full schedule of projects, and a reputation in the Portland design community that had nothing to do with Derek Lawson or the worst night of my life. That was when I saw him again. It was at a charity gala for the Arts Council, an event I had been invited to as a sponsor. I was standing near the bar talking to a potential client when I felt someone watching me. I turned, and there he was, Derek, looking like a shadow of the man I had married. He was thinner than I remembered, his cheeks sunken and his eyes ringed with fatigue. His suit was expensive, but did not fit quite right, hanging loose on his diminished frame. He stood alone near the entrance, a glass of something amber in his hand, staring at me like I was a ghost. I excused myself from my conversation and walked toward him, not because I wanted to talk, but because I needed to know. I needed to see who he had become. Derek started talking as soon as I was close enough to hear. He told me Sloan had left him after 6 months, just like I predicted she would. He told me his company had found out about the affair and quietly pushed him out, worried about the reputation damage. He told me he had been drinking too much, sleeping too little, drifting through days that all felt the same. He said he was sorry. He said he thought about me every day. He said he would give anything for another chance. I listened to everything he had to say. I felt the weight of his regret, the genuineness of his suffering, and I realized something remarkable. I did not care. Not in a cruel way, not with satisfaction or revenge. I simply did not care what happened to Derek Lawson anymore. He was not my burden to carry. His choices were not my responsibility. Whatever demons he was fighting, he would have to fight them alone. I told him I hoped he found peace. I meant it. Then I turned and walked back to my life, the life I had built from the ashes of everything he had destroyed. I did not look back. It has been 3 years since that wedding night. 3 years since I sat alone in a honeymoon suite listening to my husband laugh with another woman through the wall. 3 years since everything I believed about love and trust and forever shattered into pieces I thought could never be put back together. Today, I am sitting in the corner office of Rebirth Designs, watching the sun set over Portland through windows that stretch from floor to ceiling. My company has grown beyond anything I imagined when Harper and I sat at that borrowed desk, dreaming of possibilities. We have offices in Seattle and San Francisco now. We've been featured in national magazines, won awards. I never thought to pursue created spaces that have changed the way people live. But that is not what makes me proud. What makes me proud is who I have become. The woman who sits in this chair is not the same woman who walked down that aisle 3 years ago trusting blindly in a man who did not deserve it. She is stronger. She is wiser. She is someone who knows that her worth does not depend on anyone else's love or approval or presence in her life. Harper is still my business partner and my best friend. She got married last year to a wonderful man named James, who treats her like the treasure she is. I was her maid of honor, and when she walked down the aisle, I cried happy tears without a single trace of bitterness. My parents are doing well. Their love story continues 36 years now and counting. They were my rock during the hardest months, and their faith in me never wavered even when my faith in myself had disappeared entirely. I started dating again about a year ago, slowly, carefully, with Dr. Vasquez helping me navigate the fear that still surfaced, sometimes when I let someone get close. Most of the dates were forgettable, pleasant evenings with pleasant men who did not make my heart race or my palms sweat. Then I met Marcus. It was at an art gallery of all places, the same gallery where I had met Derek 3 years earlier. I almost did not go worried about the memories that might be waiting for me there. But Harper convinced me that it was time to reclaim all the spaces Derek had stolen from me. Marcus was standing in front of a painting when I noticed him. Not the same painting Derek and I had discussed, but one nearby. He was tall with dark skin and kind eyes, wearing a simple button-down shirt and jeans that suggested he did not care much about impressing anyone. He caught me looking at him and smiled, then went back to studying the art. We did not talk that night, but I saw him again a week later at a coffee shop, then again at an architecture lecture I attended on a whim. The third time, I decided the universe was trying to tell me something. I walked up to him and introduced myself. Marcus is an architect who designs sustainable homes for low-income families. He volunteers at a youth center on weekends teaching kids how to build things with their hands. He is gentle and patient and secure enough in himself that he does not need me to complete him. He simply wants me to walk beside him, building something together. We have been dating for 8 months now. It is different from what I had with Derek. There is no whirlwind romance, no overwhelming intensity, no feeling of being swept off my feet. Instead, there is steadiness, trust, the quiet certainty that this person sees me exactly as I am and chooses to stay anyway. I do not know what our future holds. I have learned not to make promises about forever because forever is not something anyone can guarantee. But I know that whatever happens, I will be okay. Not because of Marcus, not because of my business, or my friends, or my family. Because of me. because I have proven to myself that I can survive the worst thing I ever imagined and come out the other side stronger. The wedding night that broke me also freed me. If Derek had been faithful, I might have spent the rest of my life with a man who did not really love me. I might have missed out on building rebirth designs on becoming the woman I was always meant to be. The worst night of my life was also the beginning of my greatest chapter. That is the lesson I want to share with you wherever you are watching from today. Sometimes the things that destroy us are actually saving us. Sometimes we have to lose everything we thought we wanted to find what we actually need. If you are going through something painful right now, if you feel broken beyond repair, please know that it will not always feel this way. You are stronger than you believe. You are capable of rising from ashes you cannot even see yet. The story is not over until you decide it is over. I want to ask you something before we finish. Have you ever experienced a devastating loss that eventually led to something beautiful? Have you ever looked back on the worst moment of your life and felt grateful for where it brought you? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. If this video resonated with you, please take a moment to hit the like button and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Subscribe to the channel if you want to be part of this community where we share stories of strength, resilience, and the incredible capacity of the human heart to heal. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here with me at the end of this journey. And remember, sometimes the worst nights of our lives become the first pages of our greatest chapters. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.